Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power, one of the science curriculum coordinators from Kansas City Public Schools. Scientists, last week we spent time learning about day and night. We learned about what causes us to have daylight outside and what causes us to have nighttime or when it's dark outside. We learned about this thing called the Earth's axis, and we learned that the Earth spins on the Earth's axis, and that axis runs from the North Pole to the South Pole. Let's look at the globe just to review. So here I have my globe. Remember, we have the equator that runs as that red line, runs around the horizontal center of the Earth. And we have our axis, that's the imaginary line that runs through the North Pole, through the South Pole, the center of the Earth. Now, we also learned last week, I talked to you guys about why this red line that runs this equator that runs through the center of the Earth is diagonal. If I asked you to draw a line that ran through the center of a sphere, you probably would draw your line that looks like this, so that it runs on a horizontal, straight across line. But that's not how the Earth sits as it rotates and revolves around the sun, which we'll talk about today. The Earth sits on a tilt, which literally means the Earth is tilted. So instead of the equator running straight across like it does here, the equator still runs straight across, but because the Earth is tilted, it looks like it actually runs diagonal. Fun fact. So last week we talked day and night, and we said that the day and night is caused by the Earth spinning on its axis, right? So we talked about how spinning is what gives us day and night. When we're facing the sun, we're seeing the day. When we're not facing the sun, we're seeing the night. Well, scientists, there's another word we're going to introduce today. It's not rotate, but it does have to do with moving. The word we're going to talk about today is revolve. Have you ever heard of the word revolve or revolution? There's a couple different definitions of revolution. Well, scientists, the definition that we're going to use today for revolve or revolution is to move around an object. So this is where things start to get a little confusing, scientists. And a lot of people sometimes confuse day and night with why we have seasons. In fact, it is a common misconception. Misconception is something that people believe that actually is wrong. It's a common misconception of why people think we have seasons. Most people think that, a lot of people think that we have seasons because the Earth either gets farther away from the sun, or in the summer it's really, really close to the sun. But scientists, that's not true. The reason we have seasons is because of the Earth's tilt and how it revolves or moves around the sun. So scientists, today I'm going to demonstrate for you, I'm going to show you how the Earth moves around the sun with the tilt, with the rotation that it has for day and night, to show you how we have seasons. But first, let's talk about what causes seasons and things like that. So as you may have noticed, it's fall right now. The leaves are starting to change. They're going from green, which we have in the summer, to more of a yellow, to an orange, to a red, eventually brown, where they'll fall off the trees. And in the wintertime, those trees go dormant. Dormant just means that there's not a lot of water pumping through or flowing through the trees to provide the leaves with the water it needs. So the trees lose the leaves, and then the trees kind of just store that water until springtime. Fun fact. We're not talking about trees. Get it together. We are talking about the Earth and how we have seasons. So you also may notice that right now during fall, have you noticed that the day seems to be getting shorter? Did I trick you there? I said day. Remember, the day is 24 hours. The amount of daylight starts to get shorter. So instead, in the summertime, think like July. When you wake up, the sun's up. When you go to bed, the sun may still be up. We have almost 12 to 14 hours of sunlight during the summer. Now during the winter time, it's dark when we get up and it's dark when we go to bed. And we only get around 8 to 10 hours of sunlight during the day. That's a big difference. And so scientists, you may notice that right now, the daylight seems to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter. In fact, yesterday, the sun rose around 7:05 and the sun set around 7:10 p.m. So we're only getting about 12 hours of sunlight right now, and that's gonna get shorter and shorter and shorter, especially as we move into November and then as we get into December. Okay, let's go back to seasons. So I drew up a picture for us scientists to refer back to today. So let's take a look at that picture. So cause of seasons. So the sun sits in the center of our solar system, right? So we have the sun, and then all the planets in our solar system revolve around the sun. So they move around it, okay? Now, if you look at this picture really carefully, you'll notice that I've drawn in the axis on all 4 Earths. No, there are not 4 Earths circling the sun at the same time, but this is to show you a time lapse or what the Earth looks like, where it's at during different times of the year. So I'm gonna start with this Earth on the right. So we have the axis that runs through. You'll notice the axis is running diagonal. And Kansas City is actually about right here, okay? So it's sitting on the left half of the axis. Keep that in your brain as we go through this. Kansas City is on the left half of the axis, okay? So on this particular globe right here, if Kansas City is on the left half of the axis, so here's the axis, left half, you'll notice it's getting direct sun. It's getting lots and lots of sunlight. And it's getting lots and lots of sunlight for many hours of the day. So scientists, when we see the Earth, and we see where we're at here in Kansas City, and getting that direct sunlight, the sun is shining on the whole half of the axis to the left, that is summertime for us. We're getting the most possible direct sunlight we can for the longest amount of time possible. Now, yes, the Earth is spinning, so during this time we're also getting day and night. But if you notice, if we're up here, that's also what's causing our days to be longer because we're able to get more sunlight, and our nights to be a little bit shorter. Now scientists, as the Earth revolves and it starts to move, and it makes it about 1/4 of the way through its revolution, you'll notice our axis is tilted once again, and we're facing away from the sunlight, right? So we're starting to get less sunlight as the Earth revolves. Now as it makes its way all the way over, now we're getting even less sunlight because the left half of the axis is fully pointing away from the sun. Remember in the summertime we were getting the full sunshine? Now we're just really getting indirect. But when the Earth spins, we're having shorter days and longer nights because of the amount of sunlight that we're able to get from the sun. And then as it completes its last part of the rotation, or revolution, excuse me, scientists, we start to get more sunlight back, okay? So it starts to be longer days, shorter nights, and finally we get back to summer. So over here I gave kind of our definition of why we have seasons, or the cause of seasons. It says as Earth revolves around the sun, the tilt of the Earth's axis causes uneven warming of the Earth, which gives us seasons, okay? Now I realize that looking at a picture is one way to look at it, but I thought I would replicate what this actually looks like. So I got a lamp, and I've taken the lampshade off, so it's just the light. And then I'm gonna turn it on, nice bright light. And scientists, what do you think this represents if we're talking about the sun and Earth? We're talking about, this is the sun. Awesome. So here's our Earth, okay? All right, so I'm going to have us pay attention to Kansas City, okay? And right now, here's our tilt, so north, south, Earth is spinning. And now we're going to start Earth's revolution. Now you will be able to see the amount of sunlight or light bulb light that's hitting the sun each time, or hitting the Earth each time. So as I start to move, now you'll notice here that the axis, right, here's the North Pole, goes straight through, here's the South Pole. That North America, this half of the Earth is directly facing the light bulb, directly facing it. So we're having more, or the most, amount of sunlight during our days. Scientists, which season do you think this is? Is this summer, spring, fall, winter? Which season do you think is happening? We have the side where Kansas City, so the half of the globe where Kansas City is at, is getting the most sunlight. Which season do you think we're experiencing? If you said summer, that's right. We're getting the most amount of sunlight, the longest amount, the most direct, okay? So it's gonna be the warmest during this time. Now when we keep moving, now we start to get a little bit less sunlight, okay? So you start to see that there's a little bit less sunlight occurring. So we go from summer into fall. Now as the Earth continues to revolve, now, where are we at? There we go. Now, we are getting the least amount of sunlight. And I want to show you what that means, scientists. So right here is the United States, where we live, okay? We live in Kansas City, which is about right here. Now you will notice that as the sun shines onto the Earth, because of the Earth's axis, right, North Pole, South Pole, when I move the United States into the sun, notice it's not shining directly on it, right? It's shining more at the equator. So even though it is still getting sunlight, it's still not getting very much, right? And now we go into nighttime, back to daytime. So you see, even though it's getting sunlight, it's not getting very much during the course of the day. Now as we keep going with our revolution, now we start to get a little bit more sunlight. So we've gone from winter and now we're into spring. So scientists, here's the US, and you'll notice that as the sun is spinning, we start to get a few more hours of daylight. Sun rises, sunny, sunset occurs, and that revolution continues. Now we're back over to summer, where we're getting direct sunlight, okay? I'm gonna turn off this light because it's super bright. So scientists, for the Earth to make one full revolution, right? For it to make one full move around the sun, that takes about 365 days, which we know as 1 year. Now it's actually about 364.25, and that's why we have a leap year every few years. So, to recap, the Earth revolves around the sun, and because of the Earth's tilt, that's what gives us our seasons. Because of this Earth's tilt, we have an unequal amount of sunlight hitting in the Earth at different times. And that unequal amount of sunlight changes our amount of daylight that we have every day. Meaning that some parts of the year we might have 10 hours of sunlight, and some parts of the year we may have 14 hours of daylight. So scientists, something that's really cool that you can do at home right now, especially since we're in fall and we're really transitioning from longer days to shorter days, is to track the hours, when the sun rises and sun sets every day. Now you can do this in a variety of ways. You can, if you have an iPhone, you could go on your iPhone and look at the weather app and it will tell you sunrise and sunset. You could go on your device, or so your iPad or your Chromebook, whatever you have at home that has internet. You could Google Kansas City sunrise, sunset for today, and it will tell you. And each day you can track that. And what you can also do is you can find the amount of sunlight. So you can take the difference between the sunrise and sunset and find out how many hours of sunlight we actually had. And if you don't want to do the math, there's lots of websites that have already done it for you. But what you can do, scientists, is you can fill out just a data table. Sunrise, sunset, amount of daylight. And you can fill that in, and for a couple weeks, maybe 2 weeks, maybe you want to do this for a whole month, maybe you want to go all the way to Thanksgiving, it's up to you. You can track sunrise and sunset, and you can start to see a pattern. That's right. There is always a pattern. Every fall, the amount of daylight we see gets shorter. In the wintertime, we see the shortest amount of daylight. In the spring, the amount of daylight we have starts to get more or greater. And in the summertime, we have the most amount of daylight. But it's one thing to hear about those patterns, and it's another thing to actually track those patterns and see it for yourself. So scientists, I challenge you this week. Record the sunrise and sunset. Do that for a couple weeks and see if you can determine the pattern. See if you can actually see the difference between the amount of daylight between 1 week and the next. So scientists, to recap, the reason that we have seasons is because of Earth's tilt. Remember, Earth is a sphere and the equator goes around the Earth, but the equator looks like it's diagonal because of the Earth's tilt. Tilt. Now, because of the Earth's tilt, we get uneven warming as it revolves around the sun, and that's what causes the seasons. If you remember at the beginning of this video, I talked about how a lot of people have misconceptions about seasons. But scientists, you now know why we have seasons. So go share it with your friends, share it with your parents. And if you hear someone try to tell you something crazy like, we have different seasons because during the summer, the Earth is like super close to the sun, and in the winter, it's super far away, help me out and let them know how we actually have seasons. I'll see you next week, scientists. Have a great week.